Hold off on fining tour operators whose licenses have expired. That's the directive coming from Transport Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga to law enforcement authorities. Well, this after meetings between Chikunga's department, the tourism department and the private sector. The National Transport Department is responsible for issuing and renewing tour operator licenses. An application backlog just last year had a severe negative impact on tour operators across the country, and Tourism Minister Patricia Lille has welcomed this move as she joins us now via Zoom to talk more about this. And Minister, thank you so much for your time and good morning to you. Perhaps let's talk about how much of a thorn this backlog has been and how it's affected tour operators.
Yes, definitely. I would like to thank the Minister of Transport for the initiative. We now rely on all the MECs in the 9 provinces to make sure that they implement the moratorium that the Minister has placed on the harassment of tour operators, because we had quite a few embarrassing situations whereby tourists were asked to get out of the transport because the tour operator was still waiting on the renewal of the license. It had a massive impact, and it will definitely bring some relief. The MECs must just instruct their law enforcement agencies to start respecting the directive from the Minister of Transport.
Minister, in terms of just the backlog being cleared, we understand the Department of Transport adjudicated around 1,432 applications, and we know some tour operators are still awaiting for their renewed licenses. How many are we talking that are still waiting compared to those that have already been assisted?
There are 2 issues, Tumela. The one is that the Department of Transport cleared the backlog last year. And there was a difficulty in all of the tour operators collecting their tour operating licenses. And there we've worked together with the private sector and the Department of Transport to get people to collect their licenses. Currently, we have got about 418 applications that is still being processed. And it is this directive from the Minister of Transport will also assist them, that if they can show proof that they have applied for a tour operating license, this will also help them. So the regulatory authority in the Department of Transport, they're doing all they can to process these licenses as soon as possible.
Also, I know that not only have you heeded the collaboration with the Minister of Transport, but also the Tourism Business Council of South Africa. Please take us through how, these collaborative efforts have gone so far.
Yes, it has been a collaborative effort by the private sector and the public sector. And we were also assisted by the unit within the presidency, Vulindlela, to deal with the legislative issues here. The private sector has been very helpful in bringing to our attention within government some of the concerns that they have had. But if it was not for this partnership between the public and the private sector, we would have not seen the success that we are seeing today. We all admit we still have to do a lot of work. We still have to make sure that we cut the red tape and that we design the processes to make the issuing of licenses more easy and more effective. But that is all still work in progress.
But I also understand you equally need the assistance of tour operators themselves in terms of producing that copy of the expired license and the proof of the application.
Yes, definitely, definitely. If they don't want to be pulled off the road or harassed by the law enforcement agencies, they must make sure that at all times within their vans that they are transporting tourists in, they must be able to produce the paperwork to show that they have applied and they have applied for renewal, and then the law enforcement agencies will not be able to harass them. But we need the operators to work together with us so that we can stop this.
Just before I let you go, Minister, in terms of avoiding a similar instance in future, any long-term sustainable, I suppose, recommendations or even interventions in place? Because this remedy seems temporary, just so that tour operators continue to conduct their work and they're not negatively affected, and overall the tourism industry is not affected. But to avoid this in future, have you discussed any long-term, I suppose, interventions to ensure that this does not happen again?
Yes, the national transport regulator is in the mandate of the Department of Transport. And that is why the collaboration between the Department of Tourism and Transport is so important. And we have started engagement in May, and we continue those engagements. And the Department of Transport is looking at ways to shorten the process for applications for this to go through. But we have to work together at all times so that we can avoid and we can prevent future delays.
All right, we'll leave it there. I appreciate you speaking to us about this.
Thank you so very much
for talking to us. Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille, thank you for speaking to us, giving some clarity just in terms of tour operators who may have applied for renewal of their tour operator licenses. Now, of course, some may have been penalized or some of their vehicles may have been impounded. There seems to be a resolution in sight. But if you are a tour operator yourself, please ensure that if you have applied for a license renewal 30 days before the expiry of your license and you had not received a notice to uplift to continue operating, you need to obviously produce a copy of your expired license and a proof of application for a license renewal until that new license is, of course, issued. This, of course, to avoid you being penalized.